As we record this now, I'm expecting employees at the club to be paid tomorrow, noon latest, which is a good news story. I don't know, people getting paid, 8 days late. It's ridiculous that is seen as a good news story, but certainly will be a weight off people's minds.
Hello and welcome to another edition of All Wednesday. We're back with Alex Miller, who is in Hillsborough because football is happening soon, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd sort of forgotten what football was for a minute there, but yeah, there is football. It's happening this weekend. And yeah, just back from Middlewood Road where we spent some time speaking to Henrik Pedersen, who, with a degree of caution and realism, sort of spoke with an air of positivity, and the importance of, I think, as he put it, being a mirror for the attitude that he wants to see from those around him. And yeah, it was an interesting chat, about 25 minutes or so, and covered a lot of topics.
Yeah, some really interesting stuff. We've seen the pieces you've done so far, and a couple of bits from people like Rob Staten as well. Before we go on with the episode, because we are going to talk about what Henrik had to say, we might as well hear from the man himself. So here's a little bit of Alex's chat with Henrik a little bit earlier today.
I think it has been a very difficult situation for everyone, and every single employer have her or he has his own story in life. So I think there are so many different levels of this, and for me I do the best I can every day to be a mirror for our players, for our staff, for the coaches, for the pre-academy coaches, for the academy coaches, for the employers, to be the best mirror for them, to support them to make a top performance every day. Because of course, when people have a difficult time, what's happened when we have a difficult time, then we have a lot of thoughts, and thoughts that mean we are thinking what we should have done or what we have to do. But we also know the best performance we have done in life is when we have no thoughts, where we just do it. We are in our heart. So a daily challenge is to, when you meet the players, when you meet the staff, and they have been amazing, is to find accept for the situation where you are right now, and the next 3-4 hours you have to make a top performance. So for me, when I meet the players in the morning, there is some football things, there is some tactical things, but of course in the last period I have had a lot of focus to create the right environment where the players gonna be ready to make a top performance in the training. And the players have been fantastic to support each other, to help each other. If one was down, help him up.
That was Henrik Pedersen, the new Sheffield Wednesday manager, talking to Alex earlier. Alex, you mentioned before about some of the things he was saying. How do you think he carried himself? It's obviously the first time that you've had the chance to speak to Henrik as Owl's boss. What was the sort of interaction like, as the interaction itself rather than what he said, so to speak?
Yeah, as you'd expect, I think. We'd had the opportunity not necessarily to interview him, but certainly bumped into him once or twice around grounds and all that sort of thing. And I would describe him as a pretty positive person in terms of the way that he puts his messages across. And frankly, Sheffield Wednesday need a bit of that. There's not been a great deal of positivity. But like I said, everything was tempered with realism. In his opening gambit with the club, he spoke about stormy seas, didn't he? And there was an acknowledgement of the challenge that Sheffield Wednesday faced, an enormous challenge, as we all know, and have spoken about at great length. In terms of the squad size, uncertainty in terms of what business can and can't be done still, uncertainty over whether Barry Bannon can play this weekend. My understanding is that there is a confidence that will be the case, but while it's still unconfirmed. You just never know with the way that things have gone over the last few months. And yeah, he is looking to face the challenge front on, I think. And yeah, sort of hit all the right notes in terms of what you want to hear from a football manager in this situation.
Yeah, I think watching the videos of Henrik and having, like you say, bumped into him a couple of times while we've been on the job, um, it's not difficult to see why people like him, is it? In terms of his personality and his character.
Yeah, he came across very, very positive, and like I say, he is known to be well liked. Sort of spoken to a few people about Henrik over the last few days, and certainly at Sheffield Wednesday there is a sense of popularity there, and I think from what we've heard out of the camp in the last few weeks in terms of who the preference was for a lot of people, in terms of taking over, that sort of shined through. And I think it's worth saying that Henrik had options to leave the club. He was out of contract, could walk.
Good options as well, right?
Yeah, and could walk of his own volition. We reported interest from Brentford. Certainly a sounding out process was had there, and they quite fancied him. And we gather there was other stuff popping off as well. So for him to take up the mantle, who knows what Sheffield Wednesday looks like in 2, 3, 4 months. It could be a lot worse. It could be a lot better. And yeah, I'm sure as much as anyone, Henrik Pedersen is hoping it's the latter.
Absolutely. Well, on from that, I suppose, bit of positivity today. There was more negativity last night. There was a pretty in-depth, well, at least long statement from the EFL, wasn't there, about the sort of current state of play at Sheffield Wednesday, and in amongst that was the confirmation that we were expecting of both the the second embargo being back with the players not being paid, and the extension of the transfer fee restriction. It doesn't really change anything, does it? It's just another punch in the gut, I suppose, of something that we've got to get used to this summer.
Yeah, and as you say, it's not unexpected at this point. There's been a firm understanding of the situation throughout that certainly we and the other guys have reported, and yeah, I know there's obviously a lot of debate out there and a lot of discussion over how matters such as this are handled, and clubs being punished, and by proxy fans being punished. It won't be popular, but I have a degree of sympathy for the EFL in that they can only operate within the parameters of the rules that they have and that are voted on by the clubs and the owners of the club. So statement did feel to me as if there's pressure putting on. There were some interesting lines there in terms of the dialogue that is being had with advisors of Mr. Chansiri, and it does sort of push things on a little bit. It's clear now that the chairman is under pressure from all around, really. In terms of selling or showing that he can fund the club, and it's abundantly clear that's not the case. As we record this now, I'm expecting employees at the club to be paid tomorrow, noon latest, which is a good news story. I don't know if people getting paid, 8 days late. It's ridiculous that is seen as a good news story, but certainly will be a weight off people's minds. We gather that's at least a great deal down to solidarity payments from the Premier League, and look, those questions remain, don't they, in terms of the funding going forward. These big sacks of cash that appear for player transfers or solidarity payments, they don't come around every month.
Exactly.
So in terms of the pressure that is on Mr. Chansiri to sell the club, it just feels like it's at an all-time high, and will only go one way from here.
Yeah, it does. It does kind of feel like the heat is being turned up, doesn't it? From all angles. You know, we know there is still interest in Sheffield Wednesday. You know, that is something we've been aware of for a long time. It was very interesting to see John Textor sort of come out and publicly declare his interest. I think it's one of those that it all became a bit of a merry-go-round, didn't it, this week, with him following the club on Instagram, people getting, I would probably say, a bit too carried away on the back of that. But for him to come out and publicly say that he's interested is it's an interesting step, isn't it?
It is. It's the sort of thing that you don't see very often. And I think we've all sort of spoken about the ways that football clubs are usually acquired, in that it's usually the quiet group that you hear nothing about. And then when things are very close or indeed done, you know, that we get invited down to Hillsborough and we have a chat with them. It would be unusual to sort of speak in these terms. I think it's important to stress that, you know, there was no suggestion of a bid being made or even firm contact. And so, yeah, it's slightly unusual, but this is an unusual club to acquire, isn't it? And the processes around it. I would say, you know, I've reached out to Mr. Textor. If you're watching, feel free to give me a call back. I'd love to speak to you and pick your brain on a couple of things and where you're at. But until then, we'll wait and see what happens.
Yeah, I think it's probably quite important for everybody to just be patient on this. You know, there is probably a higher likelihood that if something was going to happen with Sheffield Wednesday, that it will be someone, as you said, who's doing things behind the scenes, because that's how this usually works. But I think it's important that people temper their expectations, because otherwise you can set yourself up for so much disappointment, and there is enough to be sad and annoyed about at this football club without sort of setting yourself up for extra bits of disappointment. But, you know, with everything happening, with what the EFL have said this week, there is, I suppose, a growing positivity that something will happen at Sheffield Wednesday at some point. And we can only hope that that's the case, because, as we've said before, this is not a sustainable way of going about things. And as you mentioned, this money is not endless. You know, that these little bits of help that they get, we are in a position now, as we have been for months, of, people get paid this week, hopefully. 4 weeks time, we're back to doing all this again, playing this same sort of circus run, isn't it?
Yeah. Not to be sort of contrary, but I'm working very hard not to feel anything, you know, in terms of where things are going. You know, you and I, probably not as much as anyone, but, you know, we're absolutely keen to see the club move on and go to better health under a new hat. And you know, throughout the summer, there's been peaks and troughs on what we're hearing and discussions that are being had. And yeah, I'm not riding any emotional wave, or not allowing myself to, really, as much as I'd like to see it happen, until something's close or contracts are pushed across the table one way or another, which we may or may not find out about. You know, we don't know what we don't know. Perhaps things are at that stage. But there's so much rope still to pull on in terms of this mess. I won't be getting excited at all.
Yeah, no, it's the best way to be, to the point where I think you've also got to try and stop reading into stuff as well, like reading into stuff that isn't there, like, oh, this has happened, what does that mean? My advice to myself at this point is to obviously look into things, because it's our job to do that, but, like, don't go, right, well, this has happened, so maybe it means this. It's not worth it.
You know what? Right at the very outset of the summer, where I think we might have spoken about it on one of these, but I reached out to a couple of colleagues that covered Reading, and that was their advice.
Yeah.
And it's funny how clearly it's sort of rung true throughout. You know, there'll be moments that you think everything's going in the right direction. There'll be moments where you think all is lost. Information that you believe to be true, once you peel away a couple of layers, ends up being smoke and mirrors. People will attempt to feed you false information. People were, the rumours on social media will gather pace before you've got a chance to verify anything, and you just all that advice has absolutely come true. And it's it's sad in a way that there are colleagues who have been in this situation and have been in this situation so recently. And I think the hope has to be, obviously, that the dawn of the independent football regulator, I think there's different views in how things actually play out in terms of their powers and how they're able to keep an eye on things. But yeah, I think the hope has to be that there's a brighter future for all these football clubs, because Morecambe, Bury, Macclesfield, look back at Bolton, Wigan. There's just too many, and it has to stop.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But aside from that depressing conversation, there is actually a football game happening this weekend. Let's talk about that a little bit. Obviously, it does come with the caveat of, there was nearly at one point not a game this weekend. Wednesday don't have that many players. I wanted to ask you what you thought was the most likely way that Wednesday might line up this weekend, because they're not entirely flush for options.
No, they're not. I asked Henrik a couple of hours ago about his feeling on where things are at with players being unavailable. He said that everyone was fit, and that's one thing. And I also asked him about where his feeling was on players walking away from contracts. As we know, there are a handful of players that have tendered the notice, and I think everyone's hoping and praying that the Josh Windass Michael Smith situation isn't played out again, because the squad just gets more and more threadbare. And he was hopeful that players are sticking around. So we'll see. On the basis that Bannon is eligible and registered, and on the basis that everyone is fit, I think the back four probably speaks for itself. Obviously, Pierce Charles in goal. I think you'd expect to see Jan Valery, probably Dom Iorfa, Gab Otebayo, and I'm forgetting someone at left back. Max Lowe at left back.
Yeah. Do you think there's a chance to be, based on sort of, I know Henrik was saying about everyone being fit, do we think that Deshaun Bernard is relatively close to playing, or what's the sort of the mood on that?
No, that's not what I'm hearing. I think it's going to be a little while. And I think, to be fair, it dates it already. Danny Rill said as much. Probably looking September, October at the best.
Yeah.
I'll try and get an update of that in the coming days. But yeah, he's been around the pre-season. He's been at Middlewood Road. But he is sort of training separately, doing bits and bobs, as is usually the case with these long-term injuries, that sort of phase back. But I certainly wouldn't expect to see him in the opening weeks of the season.
Yeah, so there's your goalkeeper and your back line. What we're doing for midfield?
There's a few options in midfield. They're flush, aren't they? My days.
Is
Sheffield
there?
Wednesday two.
Do you think we're going to see Liam Palmer rekindling his Peterborough home days in midfield?
You know what? Why not? In terms of the leadership, obviously Barry Bannon's going to start, with the caveat of him being eligible. And then you've got Svante Ingelsson. Could he play further forward? He could be on the left, perhaps. We've seen good performances from him either side. Nathaniel Chalabar, where's he at with stuff? Obviously a player with an England cap and Premier League experience. Wednesday fans haven't seen the best of him. I put in a sort of like a preview thing that goes around, and all 24 writers of 24 championship clubs get together and pen a few words about their club and predictions and that sort of thing. Wasn't a great deal of fun this year, I must admit. But I picked out Sean Facera as someone to watch, and I think it's fair to say he'll get his share of opportunities perhaps at some point. But yeah, they're flush of options in midfield. I wouldn't like to pick a three, and I'm assuming they'll line up in a similar way to last year. I think that would be the assumption right here and right now. Up top, well, you've got Ike Ugbo, Bailey Kadamashri, you've got Oliver Kabachki, you've got Jamal Lowe, Svante Ingelsson could pop up on the left. Who am I missing, Joe?
Charlie McNeil.
Charlie McNeil, could he play in the 10? We saw a bit of that from him last season, but he's obviously got fledgling experience across that front three. So yeah, look, let's have it right. Let's not kid anyone. You take Josh Windass, Michael Smith, Callum Patterson, Anthony Masaba, JD Gassama out of any championship squad, and they look a lot lighter in terms of the attack. But there's opportunities there. We've seen in his loan spell what Ike Ugbo can do. If he was to rekindle anything like that, touch in front of goal, that would be very helpful indeed. And then it's over to the younger lads, Kabachki, McNeil. We've seen little glimpses of these players. They've got a chance now. It's up to them to take it.
Yeah, could be a really big season for Bailey Kadamashri, couldn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And again, there was that period when he first came into the side. It seemed like every time he got the ball in front of goal, it went in. There's a real purple period of 2 or 3 weeks there. He's gone away to Lincoln. Bit of a mixed return, I think it's fair to say, in terms of his contribution, how much he was getting. He picked up a couple of little injuries that were less than ideal. But he'll come back more of a man, and yeah, let's see how he gets on. There's so many unknowns. Honestly, I thank you very much for putting me on the spot there for a 1 to 11, because oh my days, it could be anything.
Yeah, really could. And I think even down to the fact of, like you said, you would expect to see a similar sort of setup to last season, but maybe Henrik changes everything. Formation, maybe he shuffles that up and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is that, I asked that question of him, how close will things be? Because Henrik was very heavily involved in the setup and the technical stuff under Danny Röhl, and he said, look, we're similar. There was a bit of an admission in there. The way I put it to him, is there going to be a need to be a bit more pragmatic? And I think it's all about clarity and breaking down the roles. So I think we'll see a similar philosophy, perhaps just with a little bit more slimmed down. That would be my guess based on what Henry told me this afternoon.
Yeah, slim down is correct, considering there's probably going to be quite a few people in and around that match day squad that in normal circumstances certainly wouldn't have been. There is the other issue of they're playing quite a good football team as well. And that's, you look at some of the options that Leicester have got with, Fatawu and Ayew, and like there's some really good players in that Leicester side. So we'll have to wait and see. It's going to be a really interesting game, I think, because so little of our summer has been focused on football. It'll just be nice to watch some for a change. And we'll have to wait and see what happens in the actual game itself. Alex, thank you very much for joining us as per usual, and we'll see you again next week. Cheers.